You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. For previous episodes, visit thinkingcountry.com or find the podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud by searching for Meet the Farmers. Hello and welcome to episode 51 of Meet the Farmers. We're now at stop number 4 on the podcast road trip around the Cotswolds, Herefordshire, Worcestershire and North Wales. And I'm here sitting in a Land Rover, which seems apt given my guests for this episode spend most of their time driving about, going to different sites. I'm here with James and Katie Allen, who are first-generation farmers who set up heritage graziers a number of years ago, offering conservation grazing services as their way of getting into ag. We're at Brewern today in Oxfordshire because, excitingly, they've recently taken on some land here as the farm manager of the 1,200-acre estate wanted some grazing for around 150 acres of pasture, as well as giving some of the arable land a break and reintroducing stock onto the land. James and Katie run British white cattle, Castle Milk Morat sheep and Portland sheep across a number of sites across the Cotswolds. They sell their meat to restaurants and pubs, as well as direct to customers through a box scheme and also get an income through conservation grazing services. Katie also runs Loopy Ewes, designing and making knitwear from wool off the sheep. James and Katie, thank you so much for having me. This podcast has been a long term in the making. James, I think you contacted me probably quite a long time ago now.
I think it was before Christmas, was it?
Yeah, it was.
It
was before I was trying to plan this trip. As I mentioned in that introduction, you're farming across lots of different sites. Let's start with a bit of background. I know that you spoke to Will on Rock and Roll Farming. He beat me to it with you, and you spoke a lot with him about your background and where you were coming from, but we're going to be talking a lot about conservation grazing today and your exciting situation here at Brewern. But can you give listeners a bit of an introduction, first of all, as to your backgrounds and how you started in stock farming?
Yeah, I mean, neither Katie or I come from farming background. I have my kind of parents and grandparents, none of those farm, but my wider family do. I grew up every Easter going up to my cousin, or second cousin I think he is, his dad's farm, and helping out there, lambing and messing around in tractors and things like that. And it was kind of a small little window. I grew up in southeast London. You know, farming was just not an option. Ended up doing engineering, and kind of that was that until a good few years ago now. Probably, what's that? 10 years ago, I suddenly decided I fancied keeping some pigs, and so we had pigs in a garden, basically. Someone in the village had a field, and we did a sharing arrangement where we had kind of 3-6 pigs at a time, and they were all for pork, and it was just something fun to do with the kids and the families really. And I had young kids at the time. You know, I think Jenny, my oldest, was 4. So it was very much kind of, you know, showing the kids where meat came from and things like that. So that's how I got into it, and that kind of went on for a while. Met Katie and things ramped up, and Katie had a slightly different path.
Yeah. What about you, Katie?
So as James said, no farming in my family at all. About 8 years ago, moved to Cornwall and bought a small holding because I had been doing some various courses. I'd done a small holding course and was growing my own veggies and had a few chickens and had just got really interested in food production. And that's when I got my first sheep. And very much, you know, part of getting the sheep was wanting to work with the wool. You know, I was quite saddened by a lot of the stories that I heard about wool and the lack of value for wool, and that it was such a loss maker for farmers. And just felt really quite determined that there had to be an alternative. Then the small holding had to go, and I relocated up to the Cotswolds to be near James, and brought the sheep with me. And
came with a trailer, didn't you? And sheep?
Yeah, well, yeah. Actually, I think I sent you back down with the trailer for the sheep because I didn't have my trailer license at the time.
Okay. No,
because I had to take my towing license.
Yeah.
And the rest of this is history. But yeah, so it's been a journey, I guess.
Yeah.
When we kind of got together, we Katie had pigs in the past. I had to stop doing the pigs. We had the sheep. We didn't have any grass, so we were renting, didn't own any land at all. And we kind of wanted to do something a bit more than just rent a small field and put the sheep in it. We wanted particularly wanted cows, and to actually properly get into it. So we approached Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. Someone offered me a herd of Dexters.
Yes, and they came with conservation grazing.
Right.
Which was paid grazing as well.
Yeah, and that's what made you sort of think, what's conservation grazing?
Yeah.
So that's when that started.
And
that's when it started, yeah.
Started researching and looking into it, didn't we?
And I did a weekend kind of course, joint with Rare Breeds Survival Trust and the Ebworth Centre, wasn't it? National Trust Ebworth Centre, about conservation grazing. And I walked out of that and went, do you know what? Actually, that sounds a way in, a way of actually having grass to graze. It sounds really interesting, and it's kind of really working with nature, which is something that we're both very passionate about. I mean, Katie particularly had done a lot with it in Cornwall. And from that, I got a couple of names in the Wildlife Trust, emailed a guy, ended up having a conversation and said, look, we want to get livestock, we want to graze. Have you got any sites that need grazing? They had a beautiful valley in the Cotswolds that needed grazing. And so we bought cattle to suit that. Found another conservation grazier down in the New Forest who had British whites. And we wanted rare breeds. So we talked to the Rare Breeds Survival Trust about kind of what livestock would be good livestock to have. Chose the British whites, partly because they're distinctive, partly because they're very good conservation grazing. The beef's obviously very good. And bought our starter herd there. And that was the start of it. And we then started approaching private landowners. There's quite a few landowners in Cotswolds that have 10 hectares of fields, meadow, whatever, large house. And the first one we had, very, very passionate about his meadow. It's stunning, absolutely stunning meadow. He's got records back over 100 years. No fertilisers, no pesticides, no inputs. We had the Wildlife Trust go around, and it's pretty much a triple SI just on the meadow. And he wanted it grazed, so we came to an agreement where he paid us to graze it through the winter. And we ended up with 3-4 customers grazing three different locations during the winter.
Three, and 4 if you count kitchens.
So we then moved the livestock around on a regular basis during the winter, grazing during the winter, and then during the kind of summer months, we rented a field off a farmer for the livestock to put condition back on, and kind of and then repeat.
And you began to build the marketing and the box scheme during that time.
Yeah, Katie's background is marketing, so she's done all the good stuff on that.
I used to have when I was sort of first went into work, I worked in marketing, and I set up a graphic design business.
Okay.
And specialised in working with small businesses and then with farm diversification businesses.
Right.
And really, really loved working with farm diversification businesses. And I think that's what got me interested in food production and how farms worked, and that's why I started the smallholder course and things like that.
So let's turn towards conservation grazing itself. What is conservation grazing for you, and how does it change from site to site?
Conservation grazing to us. So a lot of the grazing we've done is calcareous meadows. There's quite a few in the Cotswolds. There's not many in the country. Cotswolds got a relatively high proportion of them, but they are massively got lost over the years. So they're very species rich, very abundant with a whole variety of wildflowers. And I don't know my wildflowers as much as I probably ought to or would like to. But I've gone round some of the sites that we graze with the Wildlife Trust guys, and they're crawling around the floor. And just, I can't believe, look, it's a pretty flower to me. But they're very species rich, and you walk through the field and you can actually sometimes struggle to see grass because they are so full, so diverse. And we graze them during the winter, so the period we mustn't graze them is when their wildflowers are doing their thing and seeding. So April 1st we are off, and then we are back. Well, we could be back kind of from mid-July, early August. We tend to be a little bit later, so we let the livestock sit on better quality grass for longer, just to try and put some condition back on. And then we go through and, work around the sites, cattle and sheep, often depending on fencing and water, but also what's suited. The cattle and the sheep graze the grass differently, so they add different benefits. And we try and work wherever possible with someone who knows more about it than we do, because we're not experts on wildflower meadows at all. So we've involved the Wildlife Trust, and where we are now, we've involved the Glorious Cotswold Grassland project. And funny enough, on Monday we had a couple of people come out, Harvey and Anna came out from them and had a look around where we're grazing now at what they're trying to do on the estate we're here now, and how grazing can actually work with them. And so in effect we offer a grazing service to try and support the wildlife and the nature in these species rich meadows.
Let's talk about where we are now, and because you've got the option of a large block of land here. We're talking about 150 acres at Brewern, and the option also to graze arable land as well. How did that come about, and what are your aspirations here?
Well, they found us. So the farm manager here on the estate, Matt, he found us on Twitter, and I think he left a message on
Yeah,
your...
he rang me at Easter and left a message, but I was away at the time with the kids, so I just sent James a text saying, we've had this phone call about someone that's got some land, can you ring them? But we get phone calls often about people with 1 or 2 acres, and we really like it grazed, and it's got no fencing and water, but it would be really good. It's good grass. So I think he was probably a bit laissez-faire about getting back to him. And then I had another text a few days later, which had more detail in it, and I was like, James, you really need to contact this guy. There's like 60 hectares of grass plus more. So you did. You rang him almost a minute.
As soon as I knew how much grass it was, I just rang immediately. And I think we were on the phone for over an hour. And Matt's run the estate here for a number of years. It's very much an arable focus, but he's really passionate about the grass and what they're trying to do with the meadows. We talked about a whole bunch of things. He'd been to groundswell the year before. I've been to a couple of groundswells, so we were talking about that. Talking about conservation grazing, what he's trying to get out of it. And there are also, as well as 150 acres here, the farm next door, there's 130 acres roughly of grass there that they want grazed. Guys used to have an arable I've not introduced Jack.
I was going to say, do you have a baby in the car?
This is Jack.
Baby Jack, 7 months
Say
old.
hello, Jack. There we are.
I think Jack gets a bit tired of us talking about cows and sheep and grass.
He's tired, bless him, after this morning's antics.
Yeah. So the farmer next door, there's a bunch of arable, but he used to have cattle, and he's in his 80s, I would guess.
Yeah, I think so. He's knocking on 80, isn't he?
And he's desperate to have cows on there.
Back on his farm.
So we are going to be grazing there. The problem is we've been restricting our livestock numbers because we haven't had enough confirmed guaranteed grass.
Yep.
And now we've got to grow. And we're short of livestock and we don't have the cash
So
to buying livestock.
It's sort of hitting a critical point in the business.
It is.
Which you could turn in different ways.
It's a real change point for us. Yeah. So we've gone from 4 or 5 sites spread within a 10-mile radius, because that's your TB movement radius, moving regularly to now being based solely on one site with up to 280 acres of grass plus arable fields to go into, herbal lays, cover crops, etc. So we've bought a bull, we're buying longhorns to get more different cows in. Some of them are turning up tomorrow. And we can grow quite significantly, which means we've got to find a home for the beef and the lamb and things like that. But it starts putting us in a place where we can become a bit more profitable. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
A bit scary as well at times.
Yeah.
There's a lot to do to try and get arranged and sorted out. buying longhorns has been surprisingly difficult.
Oh.
And getting them delivered. They were supposed to be here in 2 hours' time. I got a message this morning about 11:30 from the haulier. Yeah, we'll drop them off tomorrow. Right, there's going to be no one here tomorrow, so how's that going to work then? So there's a lot to get arranged, but the estate here, and Matt, the farm manager, is fantastic. He's really keen, really passionate, fantastic, helping out. He's out doing fencing this morning, so finishing it off. So there's 5 strands of electric wire going up for the sheep. Yep. So the sheep will be here on Sunday. We bring the sheep up, and he's digging in water pipes, and he's really excited to have livestock back on the site, isn't he?
Mm. Let's talk about your breeds, especially in perhaps the different ways that they're grazing, and I'm interested in why you chose those. The whites first. Let's talk about the cattle. Why the British White?
There had to be a native breed for the quality of grass. So they outwinter, obviously, all through the winter. The quality of grass isn't great, but the native cattle, that's what they've grown up on. That's what the breed is used to, and they thrive on it, but they don't really struggle on it. So if you put a modern cow on that sort of grass during the winter, it's going to really lose condition heavily. Whereas the native breeds, they'll put on a decent coat, they'll eat the grass and survive on it, and they get. We had, was it last winter? We had quite a frost, a whole bunch of snow, and they punched a hole about 20 centimetres through the ice on the water trough, and made 3 holes to drink from, and that's just native cattle can do that.
Yep.
And then we wanted rare breeds. We wanted to support the native rare breeds. And as I say, we had a chat with the Rare Breed Survival Trust. We were either going to do Irish Moil, British Whites,
it was Shetland.
Shetland was the other one suggested.
So we specifically looked for breeds that were recommended for conservation grazing. As well, and obviously a beef breed, availability. What we could buy, what was available, what could buy. It's quite difficult sometimes to actually get hold of rare breed livestock. Like James said, we had a nightmare with the longhorns.
And they're not even rare breeds yet.
No.
And the sheep, Portlands I have seen, but Castle Milk Morrits are a new one on me. Tell me about them.
So Castle Milk Morrits they are quite striking, quite unique in their appearance. They were originally bred in Dumfries for an estate that wanted a sort of a sheep with a deer-like quality to graze his estate, and it was through breeding Manx. I always get this wrong. Manx Lochton, Shetland, I think, and Mouflon. Sheep. So it was by combining those sheep that it created this. They're quite similar to Soways. They've got different markings on their legs.
In character as well.
And yes, and they're also a bit bigger. They're bigger than Soways. So I've got some that are particularly quite a big size. They are they are flighty. And very intelligent, and if there is a way to get past you, they will get past you. They're very quick on their feet as well. They run a lot quicker than the Portlands. They're also, though, quite easy to bucket train. I think that's probably because they're a primitive breed. They know that that's food, and food is a good thing. So they're, whereas the Portlands can be a bit lazy sometimes about coming for a bucket, whereas but you do have to be sharp on catching them. If you don't get them in the pen first time, then they know what you're up to. So they can be quite hard to
learned
catch.
A lot over the years of catching. So we've learned, for example, don't put because at the moment our hurdles are old school mishmash, baler
Bit
twine.
from here, some from there, some inherited from there, some fit together, most don't. Lots of baler twine is required. And then the Portlands are more of a lowland breed, but very, very hardy, suited to conservation grazing, and will thrive on sparser ground. They're not as hardy as, the Castle Milk Morrits are like tanks. I have touch wood. We haven't got any wood in the Defender, but I've never had fly strike with them.
Usually touch my head.
And I very, very rarely have foot problems with them.
Okay.
They're really, really quite incredible.
And they lamb
sheep.
very well, don't they?
They all lamb very well. I very rarely have to intervene at lambing time. They pop out quite small lambs. Yeah. And also part of the reason I bought them is because the Castle McMorrits have a chocolate brown fleece, and the Portlands have this very light cream fleece, which I can dye different colours, or I don't dye it, but I have it dyed different colours. So it just gives me variety when I'm designing from the knit side.
Fuel must be one of your biggest overheads.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've been going at it a while now, so you must know roughly how much you're talking about on a monthly basis. But I mean, you must travel around a lot.
We do. I think the difficulty is our fuel will get lumped. We do a lot of travelling with the kids and school runs and clubs and life as well. So I mean, I know what my monthly fuel bill is, but I couldn't tell you how much of that specifically was driving to stop, and how much of that is taxing children around.
I mean, as an example, so this morning I worked it out on the way here. We met at 1 o'clock. I was 5 minutes late, but about 1 o'clock. I've done 4 hours driving this morning.
Wow.
So we did a school run.
That's more than I've done.
Yeah.
I'm on a road trip.
Yeah.
we dropped the kids at school, so that's about just over half an hour. We then went to see where the sheep are and talk to them because we're moving from that grazing site. We're trying to help them get another conservation grazier up kind of near kind of Frampton Mansell way. So we went to have words with them. We then drove here, and that's an hour from where the sheep are. Halfway here, we've got that dreaded phone call. Your sheep are out.
Yep.
We're in 2 vehicles at this point because Katie's got to go back
to
early.
To go pick the kids up.
So Katie shot straight off the sheep. I went home, picked up the trailer, picked up some sheep mesh and picked up some poly posts. We then went back to the sheep. They were in a very large arable field, slap bang in the middle. Fortunately, Katie says she's gotten bucket trained really well, so we threw out 100 metres of mesh, caught the sheep, put them in the little trailer, dropped them in the right field. I then shot back here, so that's another hour.
I'm amazed you got here, and when you did.
That's another hour. Katie had to stop and feed
efficient.
Jack, because by that time Jack needed feeding, so she fed Jack in the middle of the field, and then shot over here. Katie's then got to go back in her car to pick the kids up later.
Which is an hour away from here.
Which is an hour from here.
Okay.
And then half an hour back home.
Then at some point tonight we've got to tidy up all of the sheep mesh that we've left in the middle of the arable field. So yes.
All in a typical day as a grazier.
Exactly. Moving on. Tell me about Loopy Ewes.
Oh, so so Loopy Ewes is my brand for my knitted and woven homewares. I guess because I came from a marketing background, I have design inside me. I'm a designer at heart, and I'm also quite an entrepreneur, and really wanted to do something with the fleeces. It doubles the income potential from my sheep by being able to obviously utilise the lamb and the meat that we sell, but also the fleeces. So I sell sheepskin rugs, and I make a range of sort of knitted homewares and accessories at my studio at home. I bought a hand-pad knitting machine. And I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the process of making and producing something. I particularly enjoy it because the material I'm working with, I've made as well. I wouldn't enjoy it if I was just buying in yarn, because I love being outdoors in the field, working with the sheep. I love the physical element of the job that we do. So for me, it's very much a whole cycle.
Yeah, all part of it.
Yeah.
And you were featured on BBC Two's Back to the Land
Yes.
with Kate Humble. How did that come about?
I've had a couple of really cool opportunities that have come up. People have just found my website, I think, and found me on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I'm really passionate about sharing my story, about what I do. And I think that really comes across when I talk with people. So it was great. It was amazing, actually. They came out and spent the day with me in the field and in the studio filming, and they put a lovely segment together. It was really lovely. It was so rewarding, and felt like to have somebody sort of saying, "Gosh, look what she does! Isn't she clever?" And it was like, "Oh wow, that's really amazing that people think that about what I'm doing and are telling everybody in the UK what I do." Because it has been such hard work.
Yeah.
You know, when I first got the sheep, I was a single mum with another baby the same age as Jack, and you know, I've had to learn everything. I mean, I couldn't knit or sew when I bought the sheep.
Yeah.
Didn't know how to knit. I just knew I was going to. You know, I didn't. You know, never worked with textiles. Couldn't sew. Didn't know how to use a sewing machine. I just knew that I could do something with the wool.
Yeah.
So it's been a massive learning curve, but it's been great.
So clearly your short-term plans are chocker. You've got lots of exciting stuff happening now. But what is long-term success for you?
Well, there's a
James
question.
being able to give up work. I
Yeah,
think.
so I have a day job. Since Jack was born, I actually, one day a fortnight, I do the livestock job, partly so that it was all getting lumped at the weekend, and when we could spend 8 hours moving livestock, and you know, the kids are sitting in the Land Rover bored, and I thought, well, I'll try and do all that heavy lifting stuff on the Friday, so I've got the weekend free. But otherwise, I've got a day job which is quite taxing, keeps me busy, and it pays the bills, which is great. And I enjoy it as well, so I'm not complaining. But what would be nice is to be able to scale up what we're doing, which this gives us the opportunity to do, to reach more restaurants and pubs, and to be selling more beef boxes, selling a lot of the wool products, and we're starting to do hides for the British whites, the Longhorns as well, do that. So that's kind of where we're going now. We're looking to get Pasture for Life accredited. It's something that fits very well with our ethos. So once we've kind of done that and got settled here, we'll grow. Longer term, when the kids start heading out of school and things like that, then we're not tied to this area for schools, and ultimately one day we'd actually like to own some land. We're very lucky here. They are incredibly supportive with fencing, water and things like that, and how we want to graze. So when we're rotating livestock every few days through grassland, but we'd love to have something which is our own, where we could set up proper handling equipment. Our handling equipment is cattle one, even is hurdles and a yoke, which we move around in a trailer. They're heavy, really proper heavy. It's great now that guys will help support us with tractor and a lifter and lift the yoke rather than us have to carry it by hand. But we'd love to have a yard that we could run livestock through, and invest in something that we can use. But in the Cotswolds, that's not going to happen in a hurry.
Well, it's never going to happen. It's just the cost of buying a farm.
Yeah, so
it's way beyond our
building towards that dream, really, aren't we? But it's a good 10 years away.
And there are very, very few tenancies. And because I've had that question before, well, why have you not secured a tenancy? And I think in the time that we've been doing this, there are only 2 that have come up in the area that we could work within. One we did get an interview for, and then the other one was you couldn't outwinter stock there. Yeah. So it would have been a very different model to what we do, and we actually made the decision not to apply for it because actually I just said I'm just not comfortable with that. That's not how I want to do it. I like outwintering the stock. It gets to a whole different level when you have to start feeding and bedding and housing down animals.
And you'd be doing a different thing that you set out to do.
Yes, exactly.
So almost what's the point?
Exactly. Yeah. That is exactly where we got to. So
we got quite far down that path though, didn't we? Before we made that decision.
And then literally, I don't know how, not that far after, we got the phone call from these guys. Yeah. And it's actually, there's far more land here than the first tenancy offered. And we're able to do it in the way that we feel is best for the environment and for the livestock. So actually it's worked out really well.
Right, we're going to try 1 minute soapbox time. I don't know whether both of you are going to do this or whether...
Do you want to do one each?
You can do one each?
Yeah, have a go, yeah.
I'll tell you what, you do yours, and if that goes really well, we'll leave it at that.
Okay,
yeah.
So listeners, this gives guests 1 minute to speak on a subject of their choice, farming or non-farming, for 1 minute. Katie, do you have a topic in mind?
Cheap food.
Cheap food, okay. You have 1 minute on the clock. Cheap food in 1 minute. Katie starting now.
Yeah, I think, there's obviously a lot in the press at the moment about the cost of farming on the environment. And one of the key areas is food wastage. And I think if food was valued more, it wouldn't be wasted so much. There's an expectation that people can go out and buy cheap food and that they're entitled to cheap food. And I've heard things to do with Brexit about the importance of us continuing to supply cheap food. And I think that that's wrong. I don't think food should be cheap. It needs to be affordable, and all people need to be able to be supported to access good quality food. But I think cheap food is a slippery slope, and something that we should be proud of: good quality food, not cheap food.
Perfect.
Yeah, that'll do. Do I need to do one?
Oh, go on.
Go on, have a go.
So I want to talk about subsidies in particular for new entrants who are first generation farmers. So very apt to us.
Perfect. 1 minute on the clock, starting now.
So the difficulty, in our industry, we know that we need to get new entrants in, and a lot of people want to get into farming. They're young, they're passionate, but the boundary to get into farming is crazy. Land is unaffordable. There isn't a lot of it about for sale. Tenancies are very rare, very difficult to get hold of, and people often require to have experience. How do you get your first one to get the experience? So I think grazing is a real opportunity for coming into existing landowners, to work with them in arable fields or to be a grazing service, but there needs to be subsidy support. And rather than for the landowner, then how about having for the grazier, or having the landowner getting the subsidies to support the grazier? So be it share farming, be it grants for the grazier to have handling equipment. You pay someone to do your hedges, why didn't you pay someone to graze?
Perfect. Oh, bang on as well.
Yeah, very rushed. I could have talked for another 5 minutes on that one.
James and Katie Allen, who spoke to me at the Bruin Estate in Oxfordshire. You can follow James and Katie on Twitter using the handle @HeritageGrazier, or find them on Instagram @HeritageGraziers, or visit heritagegraziers.co.uk. Next time, I'll be in Herefordshire speaking to arable farmer Ali Hunter-Blair, so I hope you can join me then. Please do subscribe to the podcast, then you won't miss another episode. You can subscribe on whatever platform you listen to it on. It's available at thinkingcountry.com. It's available on iTunes, SoundCloud, Eat Farm Now, and lots of other podcast providers. Do get in touch with me if it's not on your podcast provider, and I'll see what I can do. Big thanks to the Mercer Charitable Foundation for supporting this episode and all the road trip episodes, to Tom Bland for his help with production, and of course to you for listening. And I'll look forward to you joining me next time on Meet the Farmers.